If they come for me in the morning, they will come for you in the night. If they come for me in the morning, they will come for you in the night. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out for me. There was no one left to speak out for me. Just 2 months ago, January 2017, they came for Muslims. Maybe you're not a Muslim, but did you speak out? In 2015, over 20 trans persons were killed, most of them trans persons of color. Maybe you're not trans, but did you speak out? In 2014, they came for Michael Brown, Eric Gardner, and Tamir Rice. Maybe you're not black, but my question for you is, did you speak out? You see, the problem with our society is that oftentimes people only speak out to injustice that affects them personally and directly. And the truth of the matter is, it is our shared responsibility to collectively come together and speak out and against all forms of injustice and oppression. Countless acts of violence against black lives, such as police brutality and the killings of unarmed black men and women, the disproportionate incarceration rates of black men, and the educational disparities and inequities targeted toward black youth are just a few examples why folks are saying Black Lives Matter and taking action. For the purpose of my talk with you this afternoon, I want to use the national conversation around Black Lives Matter, but specifically look at what are we doing on our campuses to ensure that Black Lives Matter, to ensure that our students feel that sense of belonging and feel like they matter on our campuses. So my question for you is, how are you making sure that Black lives matter on your campus just as much as any other life? How are you making sure that the true liberation for all people is being achieved? Just 2 months ago, Rutgers University celebrated Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Week with our Dream Week host of programs and activities. The Paul Robeson Cultural Center, where I serve as a director, had the opportunity to host the Dr. Martin Luther King oratorical contest for students. We had 8 students give speeches about their social justice vision, relating it back to a quote, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere," by Dr. King. These students did a phenomenal job. The bravery, the courage that they had to get on stage and give these speeches was incredibly impressive. The room, faculty, staff, students, about 150 people, mostly folks of color, was filled with love. Students felt like they had a voice. They felt the sense of community, they felt the sense of support, and most importantly, they felt like they mattered. They felt like they belonged to the community. And as a director, I just had immense pride and joy to be in that space with those students because they felt like they mattered. But as I was giving my closing remarks, I couldn't help but think to myself that while this space is safe, and I use safe in quotations, while this space may be safe to our students, when they leave this space and they exit those doors at the Paul Robeson Cultural Center, they enter a society where oppression awaits, where they could be victimized, marginalized, and sometimes killed because of the color of their skin. That the color of their skin, being black, elicits fear and uncertainty, even on college campuses. That is the thought that runs through the minds of black folks, of any marginalized identity that is perceived as someone that they should be feared. And so I reminded the students in that space to enjoy this space, to embrace this space, and to find opportunities to continue having this space. Because you matter, and you should be in spaces where you can celebrate your identities. You should be in spaces where you can feel prideful about who you are and how you show up in the world. Now, let me be clear that this conversation about Black Lives Matter is not a new condition. We didn't just start saying Black Lives Matter in the age of social media, Michael Brown, Trayvon Martin, Sandra Bland, and so many others, unfortunately. That this is not a new condition. Black folks have been fighting and speaking up for equality for centuries, for such a long time. And yet we remain in this space today, still fighting for what many of our ancestors fought for centuries ago. For example, my dad, I love him to death, sacrificed so much for our family. Born in Montgomery, Alabama, growing up in the 50s and 60s, in the height of the civil rights movement, in the height of racism and injustice in this country. He knew at an early age that his life did not matter as a black man. And yet here we are, a generation later, me as his son, I'm still saying Black Lives Matter. I'm on Fifth Ave in New York City with my family saying Black Lives Matter. And on college campuses, our students are still saying Black Lives Matter. That college students like Terrence Crutcher in Oklahoma can be killed because of police brutality. Or Martise Johnson or Joseph Hines can be victims of brutal attacks because of race. Or black students can be the target of racial microaggressions and bias incidents, like white students in blackface. This is still happening today, even as we speak. And as Michelle Alexandra, author of the new Jim Crow, says, we have not ended the racial caste in America, we've merely redesigned it. And so the same voice that my dad was seeking in the 50s and 60s is the same voice that I seek and that our college students seek on our campuses. But what happens when you work on a campus or you attend a school that is resistant to creating these inclusive spaces, that does not believe in acceptance and full respect of individuals regardless of who they are? They don't create these inclusive spaces for black students or any marginalized students on their campus. Some of you are nodding your head because you might relate to what's happening on your campus. So what happens? What do? We can't remain silent. We have to speak up. And so I'm saying this today and declaring this a sense of urgency for all of us to take some action on our campuses. I'm going to offer you the following steps. First, I need you to raise your consciousness. Unlearn the racist thoughts that you might have received earlier in life. Unlearn those behaviors, those languages, and engage in self-work so you could be more conscious and aware of the students in which you serve. Listen to the stories of your students. Just sit there and listen. They all have different journeys, all have different experiences, and because they may all identify with one identity does not mean that they share the same journey. And so it's important that we listen and we use those stories to inform our work on college campuses. And thirdly, I need you to speak up. I need you to speak out. And I need us to come together to be advocates, to be allies, activists in our own way, to use our privilege, whether it's our racial privilege or our gender or sexual orientation or other forms of privilege we may have in different spaces. Use that privilege to be a voice for those that are silenced, to provide equitable spaces for the communities in which we serve on our college campuses. Our campuses are supposed to be inclusive spaces. We put that in our brochures, don't we? We say that when people come for open house. So if we're going to say that, we need to practice what we preach. We need to make sure that all of our students feel included and feel like they matter. If one student, one black student, one Muslim student, one trans student, one LGBT student feels as if they don't matter, then you have work to do on your campus. And you must hold yourself and others accountable. Next month, April 4th, we remember Dr. King on what will be the 49th anniversary of his assassination. His life was cut short because someone thought he did not matter. But we must fight courageously to continue his dream of equality for all people. We must fight courageously to continue his dream for all people. So we must persevere through the storm so we can all experience true liberation and equality. Similar to what our 44th President of the United States, Barack Obama, said in his farewell speech of his presidency. He said, I need you to show up, I need you to dive in, and I need you to stay at it. My friends, I need you to show up. I need you to dive in, roll up your sleeves, and stay at it. This work isn't easy, but we got to make sure our students feel like they matter. And so be the change. Be the change you want to see in the world. Because if one of us is still fighting for freedom, my friends, we are all still fighting for freedom. Thank you very much.